and welcome to Labour Tribune MP's stream tonight, where we're launching our new website, or relaunching our website, and we hope that that will be a place where we can communicate with Labour Party members going forwards and help steer the party in the direction that we all like to see it going, and to influence policy as we go forwards. We think that Labour Party members are an essential part of that, and this is part of our engagement with party members. So we hope you will join us in the debates and discussions that we intend to have going forwards. And tonight we have Annalise Dodds, the chair of the Labour Party, who's been charged with the responsibility of taking those policies forwards. A daunting task for her, but we certainly hope to have influence over it as we go forwards, and I hope you'll join us in that, as I've said. And then we have Mark Drakeford, leader of the Labour Party in Wales, who has achieved an enormous amount in his short time as a leader of the Labour Party in Wales, and brought about an amazing victory on a night that wasn't, let's face it, wasn't the greatest night across the board for Labour, but in Wales it was an outstanding result where Labour leadership in government led to people putting their trust in Mark and his government, and actually giving them a majority that they didn't have before, with a 5% swing to Labour on that night. So we're looking forward to hearing from Mark. And another, Philip, for us on that night was the election of Tracy Babian as West Yorkshire Mayor. And the Metro mayors and the mayors that we have across the country will play an important role as we go forwards in the Labour Party and building support in communities where we need to rebuild trust and support amongst people who traditionally should be voting for the Labour Party. So that's enough from me at the start, because you've not come to listen to me. You've come to listen to Annalise, Mark and Tracy. And Annalise is going to speak first. We're going to ask our guests to speak for 5 to 8 minutes. And we're very grateful to have such a star-studded lineup for our launch. So we're going to go to Annalise, and then Mark, and then Tracy. So Annalise, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
It's such a pleasure to be with you, Clive, and to be with all of those who are watching this remotely, and a particular pleasure for me indeed to be part of a panel, of course, with Tracy. I was so over the moon when she was elected, of course, our first Labour female Metro Mayor, and of course Mark as well, who I worked very closely with and with his team in my previous role for the Labour Party as Shadow Chancellor. Now, I think it's really important that we as Labour are the party that really does have those new big ideas for the future of our country. We need to have very creative conversations, ones which are ambitious and open in sourcing those new policy solutions, and having very different conversations, very open conversations with people about their hopes and their fears about the decade ahead. I know that the Tribune group of MPs is going to play a very major part in those discussions. I'm pleased that many of those MPs are with us tonight. I know also those discussions will have to be had also with our Labour councillors up and down the country, with our Assembly members, with our Scottish Parliament members, with our trade unions, our affiliated societies, our activists, and indeed right across the gamut of groups that we work with in civil society and business as well. And we really can't, as we have those conversations, be under any illusions about the scale of the challenge that we face. Clive just mentioned some of this. Under some reckonings, the election results that we saw in December 2019 were our worst results we'd had in 85 years. And while we did have some strong points that I'll go on to mention in a second, of course, we had some very disappointing results at the beginning of last month as well. Loss of Hartlepool, loss of councils like Durham and Amber Valley. I don't need to tell people on this call just how they underscored our vulnerability in some areas that should be heartland for our party. But at the same time as learning from those losses, we've got to learn from our successes. We have not done that enough as a party. Clearly, Mark and his team saw Welsh Labour return to power with their best ever result since devolution. I've sometimes heard Mark saying it's joint best result. I'm going to say it's the best ever result. We've seen 8, of course, of the 10 metro mayors in our country now being Labour. Nick Johnson in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and Dan Norris in the west of England, as well as Tracy being elected, is certainly not dead certs from the beginning of these campaigns, but very, very strong results for us as Labour. And we made some gains in very unexpected places. In my own county of Oxfordshire, which for the first time in living memory actually is likely now to be run with a strong contingent of Labour at its helm, but also in places like Worthing. Last week I was in Worthing to meet Becky Cooper, who in 2017 was elected as the first Labour councillor in 41 years in Worthing. Now she leads a Labour group that's 15 people strong, and they're just 1 seat away from toppling the Tories. So we've got to tell those positive stories of our wins and face up to the reality of our defeats as we move forward. And we must be focused on that forward future direction, because our country needs leadership to face up to the enormous challenges that we face. Not the short-termism of the Tories, but the long-term focus from Labour. You think about the challenges as well as opportunities coming up over the next decades. The digital revolution continuing at pace, meaning new jobs and improvements to our lives if we can harness that technological power for good, but many more people being left behind if we can't. Our country is going to be getting, of course, also older on average, meaning we simply must have answers to social care and to pensions as if we didn't need them already before. And giving dignity in retirement to a growing group of people is going to be incredibly important, but more challenging with a smaller number of working people in comparison. And of course, by the end of this decade, also China is likely to be the biggest economy on earth, the culmination of a decades-long trend that's fundamentally reshaping trade patterns and geopolitical relationships. And of course, as we know, the climate crisis that is already upon us will only grow even more urgent, with the actions that we take right now determining whether we will be able to save our both ecosystem and human society as we know it now. Those would all be big enough challenges for us, but of course the last 12 months has accelerated many of those challenges. The rise of China, of course, continues even faster than before. The pace of digitalization, the same. But we've also seen those weaknesses in our country highlighted through what's taken place over the last 12 months. The North-South divide, the creaking lack of resilience of our public services after 10 years of neglect, and the awful insecurity in which so many people have been living. And here we've got to be confident. It's only through Labour values we can face up to those challenges. Our Labour values of equality, of promoting security, not free ice cream, even though you can hear that in the background. Sorry about that, the ice cream fan going past, but also ambition for our country, making sure that we're on people's side. And we deliver as Labour when we work together. We've seen that in government. I just want to say, I'm not just saying this because Mark's here, I think Welsh Labour here has shown us how we as a party can harness the best of what we've seen during this crisis, as well as learning from the worst of it, because they showed that when we work together, we can achieve so much more based on that principle of solidarity. You see how communities came together to support the vulnerable. You see how government in Wales worked with business and with trade unions to produce ventilators in record speed, not Dyson's scheme, the one that was developed in North Wales. And you also see how differently they're valuing those who pulled us through, from social care workers to those who work in the NHS and in public services. There is an alternative future, and it's one that Labour must see. So I'm really pleased to be driving forward that policy review and want to work with our Tribune MPs and indeed supporters in order to do that. Thanks very much, Clive.
Thanks, Annalise. And yes, you highlighted it. It's a long-term, a long way back from where we were in 2019, and we've certainly made a start. But there's a lot. There's a big challenge in front of us, and that's absolutely right. And there are that you know the big issues that you've highlighted are ones that really only a Labour government will tackle. We've seen the way that the Conservatives really have fallen when it's come to taking tough decisions about COVID and moving forwards. They've actually, given contracts out to their friends, and their priorities have been completely wrong at key moments during this last year. And we've got to make the case for change that people will want to see when that next election comes. Anyhow, let's turn to Mark. Mark, you're very welcome. As I said at the beginning, a very welcome victory for you and your colleagues in Wales. But I think it's the way that you've shown calm and been authoritative in leadership at key moments that people warmed to and felt confident about. So it's a tribute to you too, personally. I think the victory that you achieved in Wales. So thank you for joining us tonight. We're really grateful for you being here, and look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for the invitation. I'm looking forward to spending the hour with you all, and I've really enjoyed listening to Annalise in starting the evening off. And in a way, I would just want to continue from the last part of what she had to say, because part of the reason why I think we've managed to have success in Wales, and remember, we have been in government ever since 1999. This is the 6th election in a row that people in Wales have chosen to elect a Labour government, is because the language we speak into them and the type of party we try to be resonates with them as being authentically Labour. What I'm going to offer you are 3 of those authentic Labour values that I think we have to say more about and speak up for more. And then I'm going to offer you 3 more that came, I thought, to particular prominence in the election campaign in April of this year. So here are my 3. There will be more to offer you of fundamental Labour values that I think we have to foreground in the way that we have that conversation with the public. And the first one is the basic proposition that good government is good for you. In a way, I think we've never completely managed to vanquish the Thatcher mantra that government does best when government does least. But that idea of the neoliberal right is one that obviously we reject in the Labour Party. And people in Wales, I think, genuinely do believe that when there are common problems that require common solutions, that collective action through the power that government can bring is the best way to find those solutions. And particularly those solutions that reach deepest into the lives of those people who need those solutions the most. So we're unashamed in Wales about the fact that government is a force for good in people's lives when government does well. And the whole experience of the pandemic, in a way, reinforced that for people. The fact that we were able to do things together, to act in that collective way, meant we were all safer as a result. So that's my first of these underlying values. The second one, public services, is one of citizenship, not consumerism. People who come to use the NHS in Wales are not customers. They are there because they are Welsh citizens who have contributed to that service and who look to it to be provided with a public service spirit. And again, during the whole of the pandemic, I think that powerful sense of the commitment of those people who work in the NHS, the fact that when you come forward for vaccination, it's not who you are, it's not where you live, it's whether you've got money in your pocket, It's not whether your voice has been loud enough to push you to the front of the queue. You are offered vaccination in the order of clinical need. The most vulnerable are at the front of the queue, and those who can manage to wait a bit longer, wait a bit longer. That sense of genuine public ethos, the public spirit of our public services, and that our relationship with them is not one of serial shoppers, always trying to find a better deal for ourselves as individuals. It is a relationship, as I say, of citizenship. And I think that's a Labour value for me. The third one of these underpinning values is that we're believers in a more equal society, not a more equal opportunity society, hard as that is to achieve. We're in favour of a society. They draw on a wider pool of talent, they enjoy better health, and they teach one another that the things that matter to me are the things that matter to the people I live next door to, in the same street as, in the same community. That we have a fundamental identity to us in common, and we get that. We get that when our society is a more equal society. So I think those fundamental Labour, we must be willing to beat the drum for them. We must say, as Annalise said, that if you believe these things, then the society we live in will be different and better for you, and better for the people who matter to you, and better for the place that matters to you as well. And in a way, that's the start of my three values that I think came to the fore during the election here in Wales, because my first one of these is a sense of identity. So we are very much and proudly Welsh Labour. And we've always managed to persuade any other party in order to show that you are Welsh. So that means that we say to people in Wales, we're proud to be one of you. We're proud to represent the place that we stand up for, that we're the government for, that we actually like Labour voters, and we're quite like Labour voters ourselves. And that very strong sense of identity is something we work very hard at. It's a very conscious difference to what happened in Scotland. We try and live it out. My great friend and person I worked with very closely in the first decade of devolution, Rhodri Morgan, very hard to think of anybody more Welsh or more Labour. And this part of that sense of belonging to the place that we seek to represent. Andy Burnham has done the same thing for Manchester, isn't it? To be Labour and to be Manchester, they're natural. That was very important in this election. My second quality, and I don't mean to sound it in a critical way, but it was unity. We ran an incredibly united campaign. I know it's easier to be united when things are going well for you, but this was a campaign where wherever I went, I met Welsh Labour MPs. We were joined on the campaign by Keir, by Angie, by other members of the front bench. What a difference it makes when you're knocking doors and you've got a good Labour councillor next door to you, who knows their area and is known to their local electorate. Our trade union movement was huge in the support that we had from them. Movement. And I think that makes a huge difference And as I say, well, I don't want to be critical. For quite a long time, we haven't sounded like that, have we, as a party at a national level. And then my third quality that was really important in the election was credibility. With a slogan of trust and ambition. Trust because what we've done during the crisis. Ambition because of what we were offering for the future. But our ability to persuade people that they could trust us with the future was rooted in the fact that we had a record of being in government and things that we'd already done. So in Wales, you already have free prescriptions. Children in primary schools have a free breakfast before the school day starts. We don't need to reinvent educational maintenance allowances because we would, and our credibility rested on the things we'd already done. And then the forward look, the forward offer, an authentically Labour offer, the things that translate those values I talked about into the things that people can see making a difference in their own lives and the lives of their families. So we've given a guarantee of a job, education or training to anyone under 25 as the economy recovers. We will pay the real living wage to our social care workforce because of everything that they have done during the crisis. We will legislate to ban the use of the most frequently littered single-use plastics in Wales. We will create a community bank which will be open on the high street in towns the length and breadth of our country. We will be serious about that other great crisis of climate change. We will create a national forest here in Wales. Some of you will know we have a national coastal path. You can walk right around Wales from one end to the other without ever leaving the coastal path. We will create a national forest where you'll be able to walk from north to south Wales without ever leaving our national forest. We'll create the first new national park ever created in Wales for the last 65 years. Another contribution that we want to make to using the huge natural asset that Wales has to create that sort of greener, sustainable future where young people growing up in Wales feel that their interests are being attended to today. So there it is, Labour, being proud of the things that make us Labour, and then translating those things into the thing people of that in April and May, and we got, as Annalise said, you know, the best result we've ever had, despite the fact that we've been in government all those years, and where time for a change is a slogan that our opponents were always trying to run against us. It turned out people didn't want to change. They wanted a Labour government because they knew that the Labour government would be on their side.
Thank you, Mark. I mean, setting out why was it you won? It can only make us envious in England when we're under a government led by Boris Johnson. You know, hearing all those things that you've introduced, and unless you have good quality public services, we're never going to tackle the issues around inequality. And you know, good government is good for you is a good line that we should all adopt. Thank you very much, Mark, and we'll be coming back with questions. So if people have questions to ask, it would help me enormously if you could put them in the chat. So please let us have some questions, because we do want to interact with people who are watching, and so we can't do that unless you communicate with us. So please do. And can I now welcome our next speaker, next guest, Tracy Brabin. Thank you very much. You must have been through an exciting change in life over the last few weeks, Tracy. Congratulations again. thank you again for joining us tonight, and we're all looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and what an absolute pleasure it is to be amongst former parliamentary colleagues. And I was absolutely struck by Mark's commitment to his community and around identity. And I think that's something that's really important and has played out in the last 30 days when I've been the mayor. That sense of belonging and being a person that comes from the region and speaks for the region, I think has really did resonate. And can I just say congratulations to you as well, getting the Tribune Group's website up and running. We know that you're going to be part of the pressure and the direction of travel to get Labour back into government at the next general election. And certainly it's regions like West Yorkshire, we are crying out for a Labour government. So please do everything in your power to get us over the line in the next few years. So for those on the call that don't know me, I was the Member of Parliament for Batley and Spen, and a real privilege to serve my hometown where I was born and raised. And because of becoming the Mayor and the Police and Crime Commissioner, I've stepped down, and we've got a brilliant and incredibly strong candidate in Kim Leadbeater, Jo Cox's sister, a brilliant campaigner in her own right, and someone that really kept our community going during the COVID pandemic, and has done, I would say, an incredibly brave thing by stepping up. And I know you will wish her, as I do, all the very best for the campaign. I know we're going to get over the line, but we'll need you all to get involved. So if you're thinking about coming to Batley and Spen, we've only a few weeks left, so please do jump on the train and come and help. Certainly, we need to stand shoulder to shoulder against the far right in Batley and Spen, and I know you'll be part of that. So, as Annalisa said, I'm the first ever West Yorkshire Mayor, and also the first ever woman Metro Mayor, and delighted that it's brought 38 million a year for the next 10 years to our community. And so it's brought opportunities for investment, but also not just hard powers of the mayor, but the soft powers of convening and collaboration. And as I said, this is my 30th day in the role, but I've already set out fulfilling a number of the manifesto pledges I was elected on, starting that direction of travel. Many inspired, I have to say, Mark, by the Welsh Government, pledges that seem to really resonate with the people of West Yorkshire. And if you'll indulge me, there are 10 pledges. We call them Tracy's 10 Commandments, but it might be useful to know what those ideas were that engaged and excited the public. And having got 60% of the vote and doing much better than the pundits thought, I do think this is what landed with the public, creating 1,000 well-paid skilled jobs for young people, prioritising skills and training to ensure everyone in West Yorkshire has the skills they need to secure work, including commitment to a digital academy, supporting local businesses and being a champion for our regional economy. You won't be surprised that one of my manifesto pledges was to lead a creative new deal and to ensure our creative industries are part of the broader recovery strategy. I represent a very diverse region, so I wanted to make sure inclusivity, equality, diversity was at the heart of everything I did. So we're going to appoint an inclusivity champion to work with all of us to make sure that the economy and coming back from COVID benefits us all, because a fair and just recovery has got to be our priority. I'll, as Police and Crime Commissioner, recruit 750 more police officers and staff to fight crime. I'll be putting the safety of women and girls at the heart of my work as the Police and Crime Commissioner. Also, the biggest topic in my inbox, buses, and as someone who commutes into work from Gomersall, I know our bus network is broken. So we will be bringing buses back into public control introducing simpler fares, contactless ticketing and greener buses. And it was a real privilege in my first 3 days to sign up to the Enhanced Partnership, which will mean we'll get money from government to make the buses better now, whilst also committing to bringing buses back into public control and setting off that train of work that needs to be done. Building 5,000 sustainable and affordable homes. As someone that grew up in a council flat all my life, I know how important it is to have that recovery. If we have a just recovery and a fair recovery, people must have somewhere safe and warm to call home. Also, finally, to tackle the climate emergency and protect our environment. And one of the biggest and most important commitments, surely, to hit our 2038 zero carbon emissions target. Government is 2050. We're ahead of the curve. We've a lot to do. We need to halve our carbon emissions every 5 years. It's a mammoth task. And that's why every one of my manifesto pledges has that green agenda absolutely threaded through it. And transport, of course, is vital. And we need to bring those buses back into our control so that then we can have a greener, cleaner service. And we've seen how it worked for Andy Burnham in Manchester. That was one of his central pillars of his re-election, is about bus ownership and bringing it back into that public control, ensuring an effective and reliable and affordable service in the meantime. The building of the 5,000 new homes, that's also the green agenda riven through it, because that's about retrofitting homes, making sure we have sustainable homes, making sure we find those jobs for young people to do that work as we rebuild from the COVID pandemic, but also to make sure we tackle homelessness, which surely is a scourge on all of us as one of the richest countries in the world, to make sure that everyone has a bed for the night. And tackling that climate change emergency, I will have hard powers as the mayor and money to spend on hard flood defences and programmes of decarbonisation to tackle the climate emergency, because we know that it's real. And we know that communities like Hebden Bridge, where what was once a once in a lifetime event, flooding, is now every 2 years. And we know that those businesses that are being washed away, homes that are being flooded out, that can't get insurance, that needs to be tackled for us all to benefit and to flourish going forward. It's also an opportunity, as I mentioned, for jobs in our industrial heartlands, in our ex-pit villages and mining towns, to create those green jobs in a new and vibrant manufacturing sector that brings well-paid, decent work. And that's why I'm signing up and creating a Fair Work Charter along the same lines as Mark and also Andy and Steve, where we will have that commonality of purpose to make sure that we bring businesses with us to pay proper, decent money to keep that West Yorkshire pound in West Yorkshire, and also to make sure we don't become the sweatshop of the country where others have led ahead, making sure that their wages are at a decent standard. We need to keep up with other regions to make sure that companies know their obligations and that they can't pay people below the living wage, because we know that leads to poverty. And also work, jobs. It was part of my commitment to the public, and it's vital people get the skills that they need. After furlough ends, we're going to potentially see more unemployment, so retraining is going to be really important. And like Mark, I've pledged that everyone age 16 to 25 is either in education, training or work. Really important. Along with that, I'm going to run a Mayor's Green Gateway using the Kickstart programme, but those young people are going to be seconded to the green sector, so they get the skills that they will need when we attract more green businesses to the region. So it's about being a champion, I think, for our region and our regional economy, celebrating startup opportunities, the Creative New Deal that will help regeneration, skills and jobs. And I often find it surprising that people will choose a place to live that has a great cultural offer over and above good schools. So I know that creativity and culture can be a magnet for our community. And I just think, finally, if I may just reflect on what Mark has said, it is about a clear narrative, and Mark's points could not be more clear, and a clear offer, and also the ability to deliver for the public and the people that you represent. And if I may just say, last night I was on the bus home, and a young man came up to me and he said, "Oh, you're that mayor, you're Tracy Brabin. I voted for you because you're one of us." And I think my own personal story, I think, chimed with a lot of people, but also being a really proud, loud Yorkshire woman, I think people understood that I would be their champion and their advocate, and work with government when we can get things done, but also challenge government, as we saw with Andy Burnham last year, where we feel we're not getting a fair deal. So I think it's important to have the clarity of ideas, but also to really say who we are, what is our identity, and that is work that Annalise, I know, will be taking forward about what is the Labour family identity to offer to the public in the run-up to the next general election. Thanks so much, Clive.
Thank you, Tracy. That's excellent. And I think that the strong theme came through there from you and Mark about place, that identity, the identity with that location, and how people really appreciate that and feel strongly about that. And it's an important part of being a candidate. And I think many of us as MPs could echo that in terms of how we represent our areas and become associated with our areas as champions for people who live in our constituencies. It's a very, 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 very strong message, and everything you have planned, is really exciting and really demonstrates why mayors are going to be so important in demonstrating the difference between Labour when it has power and the Conservatives. And we've had some questions come in. So we've had one on municipal socialism, which you and Mark have touched on, key workers and social care. So if I can start with Annalise. And ask Annalise, in terms of listening to councillors, our metro mayors, people like Mark, who are in power, how are we doing in terms of a Labour Party structure to bring together that experience that those people have, to learn from what they are doing, learn from their successes? And you've listed a number of them where we've had successes at local government level, and make sure that we can develop policies based on practical experience of Labour in government. Over to you.
Thanks very much. I would say that we're doing better on that, arguably, than we have for quite some time, but we're still not doing well enough. No question about that. I mean, we have created quite a number of new mechanisms to make sure that we're always talking to each other. So, for example, LGA Labour, they've set up a series of panels for all the Labour members of the shadow cabinet, so that they have a contact group of councillors who work on that issue. I certainly found that incredibly helpful on economic issues when I was working on them before. We had very strong relations with a number of local authority leaders, also with the Labour Metro Mayors teams, and indeed with our Welsh colleagues and Scottish colleagues as well. But of course, this can't just be something that we do in the background. It's got to be something that we do continually every time that we as Labour are presenting ourselves to the public. And, I've always been determined not just to criticise Conservative approaches. Of course, we need to do that, but to offer that Labour alternative. And so often that Labour alternative will already be in practice somewhere up and down Britain, where we've got that Labour representation. Very, very often, for example, I would draw attention to the big Labour difference on issues like, for example, business support, where in Wales it really was concentrated on particularly those smaller businesses that struggled in England to a much greater extent because they didn't have that backing from central government like they had in Wales. But we've got to do this continuously until we're absolutely sick of it. Now, I'm really sick of, just one last example on this, Clive, of, you know, Tories kind of jumping up, and every time they talk about the West Midlands, they will mention Andy Street. It particularly upsets me because I know we could have had such a terrific mayor there in the West Midlands if we'd had Liam Byrne elected instead. And I also know that Liam's shown quite how thin Street's record is in practice, but we need to be doing exactly the same with Tracy and Mark and others. Every time that we stand up to speak about a policy change, when we're talking about an area of the country, we need to be bigging up those Labour voices. Well, they don't need bigging up, we just need to be describing what they're doing, because no one else is going to be their tribunes beyond us. It really is down to us in the party to achieve that.
If I can come to Mark, and if you by all means comment on that last question, Mark, but at the same time, can I introduce the issue about key workers? We've been asked, what can we do to show key workers that we value what they've done for us, and actually what they've always been doing. Actually, key workers in our public services, I think, have never got the respect that they deserve, but certainly have come to the fore during the pandemic over the last year. So, what can we do to ensure that they feel that Labour, in particular, values their services?
Well, just a couple of things. Here in Wales, we've had a programme over the period of devolution of insourcing public services. We try and move them back closer to the public service, and where we can, to make sure that our services are run in the public interest rather than for private profit. And I think that does matter to the people who work in them, both because they get better terms and conditions and they're better treated, but being part of the public service gives you a standing and a status that matters to people who work in them. So, in our manifesto, we have a commitment to eliminate the use of private providers for the care of children who are taken into local authority care here in Wales. Now, there isn't an enormous amount of it, but we still do end up using it from time to time, and we will find ways of being able to use the power often of municipal socialism, as you said in the beginning, to recreate public services shared between local authorities. Sometimes using not-for-profit providers through the great cooperative tradition we have in Wales, to make sure that when a child is being looked after by a public authority, nobody else is making a profit out of that that very difficult situation. So insourcing, bringing people back, giving them the uplift in terms and conditions, even when pay isn't always what we would like it to be, as we would like it, but giving it the standing and the status that goes with that. And then when it comes to asking people to vote for Labour, then I think as a mantra that I preach to people in the party here in Wales, when I'm out trying to get people to come out and knock doors and do everything like that, is that we have to earn every vote that we have for the Labour Party. That nobody must ever feel that we take their vote for granted. And that's particularly true in some places where we've lost ground in recent years, and we could have lost ground in those valley communities here in Wales this time. But we were out there. We were out there talking to people, and our approach is to say to them, we value your vote. We want to earn your vote. We're here to ask you for your vote. We never, ever take you for granted. And that's true of those key workers as well, isn't it? Is that when we want them to vote for us, it can't be on any other basis that we have earned their trust, that we've earned the right to represent them. And I think there's something, if you frame the conversation in that way with people, that we are not there to tell them things, we're there to have a conversation with them, to learn from them, as well as to tell them what we can have to offer. It changes the dynamic. it tells our key workers that we think of them as a valuable resource from whom we can learn, as well as people who we seek to represent.
Thank you, Mark. Tracy, do you have anything you want to add on those two subjects?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And certainly Odette's question is very welcome. Just as a side note, there is a thank you day for key workers July the 4th, and I will be leading the region and encouraging and working with council leaders to light up buildings and to say thank you to our key workers. And there's a whole sequence of events during that day. But certainly we have to be aware of who was impacted by COVID, and it is the poorest and those who are often, there's too much of the week left as opposed to their money in their pocket. And we know that food bank use is on the rise, more children living in poverty. We have to rebuild back for the community that has been hit the hardest, because for people like myself with a garden and a roomy house, the lockdowns, and there have been lockdowns almost over a year in West Yorkshire on and off, different sets of restrictions. We have really had it tough. Lots and lots of our children have been out of school more than they've been in school. The gap in learning is wider in the north than in other communities. And certainly our key workers are part of that narrative, that we must support an equitable, fair and just recovery from the pandemic. So that is absolutely about the Fair Work Charter. My sister is a carer, visiting people in their homes. And I know that there are people making a profit out of that offer. Now, in Leeds, there is a cooperative version that works for the carers themselves. I want to see that expanded. And as an ex-cooperative MP, I am definitely bringing those values of cooperation and social enterprise into my thinking, and especially when it comes to house building and elsewhere, to make sure that that cooperation is a theme that runs through my tenure over the next 3 years. But our key workers, our bus drivers, our police, our NHS staff, we just can't clap for them. We have to absolutely support them. And that is homes that are affordable, and prioritising key workers to get those homes. It is about using the levers of power to make that difference for those communities who've done so much and who have suffered so much as well this last year.
Almost provided the perfect segue to the next question, which is about social care. The question that we've been asked is, how are we going to tackle the issue of social care and deal with the problem of how we finance it, how we pay for it going forwards, and how we treat the staff within social care, which has come to the fore very much and been highlighted very much during the COVID crisis. So, Tracy, do you want to take that one first?
What's been frustrating about the devolution, and one of many things that's frustrating about devolution, is that the mayoral deals are very different. So, for example, Andy Burnham has health. I don't. I have police and crime, whereas Dan doesn't. So there is a lack of a sort of level playing field. But what I would say is that this is the floor and not the ceiling. And I will be making the case that if the government believe in devolution, and let's see if we ever see this devolution white paper, then we must have that conversation about giving us agency over our lives, because we have seen that people are now sick to death of strangers in Whitehall and Westminster. And I have to also include my colleagues on the Labour front benches, that they are people who are at a distance in Parliament, a long way away, making decisions that impact on their lives. What they're looking for is those local voices that can change the parameters. Now, of course, I have no hard powers over social care. But what I do have, as I've explained, is an appetite to convene, to bring people together, to set the direction of travel about how people work, how they are protected when they are at work. And we have seen, haven't we, during the pandemic, Labour councils really stepping up, getting PPE for those care homes when the government were too busy giving their friends contracts to actually tackle the crisis on the ground. And Labour councillors, again, working really hard to get hot meals for hungry kids, tech for kids who didn't have it. These are Labour values in action. And I do think Labour councils and councillors making the case for a better version of social care. I will work with them side by side to make that case to government and to convene the people who need to be in the room to talk about it, because it's going to be a really big challenge going forward. And whether that's also impacts on house building. There's a brilliant housing association called Manningham Housing in Bradford that build care homes for older South Asian elders, and there is this assumption that the South Asian community look after their own family members, but that means there's been an explosion in loneliness, because there's been older South Asian men and women who've been locked up for almost a year because of the pandemic, living alone, wanting to go elsewhere, wanting to go to a home where they can be with people of their shared commonalities, but being unable to do it because there's no provision. So I can work behind the scenes, use my soft power, but currently I don't have that power, unlike in Wales and elsewhere.
Mark, if I can ask you, what do you have any plans for how to tackle the issues? And I mean, how do you go about providing services of social care in Wales? And do you face the same challenges as we do in England, for instance? Hi, Mark. Did you hear that?
You know, we absolutely face the same challenge in the Kingdom, and the need for social care rises all the time. Can you hear me?
Yes, can. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we face the same challenges because we've got an aging population. Our aging population means we face the same challenges. How do we go about it? Well, we go about it in social partnership. So we have a National Social Partnership Forum. It meets every 2 weeks. I chair it. It brings the public sector employers, private sector employers, the trade unions and the Welsh Government around the table together. It's been absolutely invaluable during the COVID crisis because it really has been a place where we have thrashed out solutions to the hardest challenges. And we have set up a social care forum as part of that social partnership arrangements. So the forum helps us to design the future. In terms of paying for it, we've been working on the idea of a social care levy, a revived national insurance system in which we would ask people to pay into a dedicated fund where people will be able to see where their money is going. They would know the purposes for which that money could be spent, government, and people will be asked to contribute a bit more towards it as they get closer to the time that they may need to use it. So you pay the least of all when you're young and you never think this is going to happen to you. And by the time you're in your 50s or 60s, you'll be paying the most you'll ever pay towards it. The biggest gap in the thinking, I think, though, in persuading the public is, what do they get for it? What will be the nature of the social care offer that we will make over the next 20 years? And if it's just that you get a bit more of what's available now, or you get 2 biscuits with your tea instead of 1, then I don't think that's going to be sufficiently convincing for people. So we are working hard with people in the third sector, particularly people with imagination and creativity, about what the social care offer will be to meet the needs of an aging population, but a population that is generally healthier than they were in the past, and where different ways of doing things gives us new possibilities to go on supporting people, to go on being in charge of their own lives with the help they need for longer, and for people to remain, in charge of their own destiny, knowing that they are supported by the collective effort and provision that we can make together in Wales.
Finding that trust in what the government is doing, so that people are not just contributing to something that that may or may not happen, but being clear and having almost a contract with people about this money will go towards this to make sure we have a national care service. I think is a way we describe it. And Elise, obviously we're at the start of a big policy process, so I don't expect you to have a solution to this one, but by all means comment on it if you do. But I'll go add another question just to move us on, because I know you don't want to eat into your time. You get away by. I'm going to overrun a little bit, so please bear with me and put it down to my chairing. But what about we've heard a lot about identity and how people relate to that. Mark spoke about it, and Tracy spoke about it a lot. So what advice can we give to people who are trying to win in places where we currently don't have MPs or we're not in power, to create that connection, to how to build that link with the community and the place that they're seeking to win voters' trust?
I think that's an incredibly important question, and I was reflecting on this actually with Tracy's comments in particular, where, of course, we had the kind of facade under Conservative-led governments that there was choice for local authorities for a long period, exactly what social care they would provide. I mean, ultimately, there wasn't really choice. There was a race to the bottom, and eventually all local authorities, as we know, pretty much down to that low level of provision, eventually having had a postcode lottery, which actually a lot of people were, myself included, quite critical of, because of the fact that it offered really radically different levels of support in different places. So I think we need really, as a Labour movement, to be talking about these kinds of issues in much, much more detail. We have got that constitutional commission, of course, set up by Gordon Brown, both the mayor, local for are being to have that really important debate, because the story for the areas that we are representing and that we seek to represent, and that we're identified with those stories. And I think we've heard some excellent examples of that tonight from Mark and also from Tracy as well, and of course of many others from our excellent Labour representatives, that we craft that story, but then also that we avoid the pitfalls that so quickly can befall us when Labour is viewed as ultimately responsible for everything that's going wrong, as well as things that can be going right. I mean, we found that, for example, very, very much, I found it anyway, in Hartlepool, where when I knocked on doors, people assumed Labour was still in power, even although we weren't anymore. Problems on Labour associated positives, actually very often where there were things that were going better, they were a legacy of what Labour put in place many, many years before. So I don't think these discussions are easy. They're not simple discussions, but they are ones that ultimately we need to have, I think, as a Labour movement. I think we need to be much, much more relaxed about policy innovation. But at the same time, that's got to be within a framework where ultimately we want to see fairness and equality and opportunity for everyone. Some of the kinds of devolution of economic power, allegedly, that the Conservatives are delivering right now, the pulling of business rates and so forth, because they don't include within them redistributive mechanisms, very often what they're about doing is really concentrating pain in areas that were all suffering, rather than additional control. But certainly a lot for us to talk about on this, and we're running out of time, but I'd be really interested to hear both Tracy and Mark's responses on those issues, I must say.
Right. Okay. But we are going to have to draw it to a close. So we did say we'd give a couple of minutes at the end to each of our guests. We wouldn't be polite not to do so. So, Tracy, if I can come to you, if you want to comment on that last question, by all means do so. But if you've got a little speech to finish the evening, again, I will thank you at the end. But thanks for joining us. It's been a real joy.
Thanks so much, Clive. It's been a real pleasure. It's gone so quickly. I won't take time to make big comments, but just to pick up on what Annalise was talking about. And certainly it's seeing Labour values in action on the ground, whether that's running a food bank, a stay and play for families, that are struggling, whether that's intervening to try and get your local park protected, planting trees, putting our values into action and actually changing lives for the better at a very local level, I think is really important. But the one thing that people commented on time and again, after this dreadful year, what people wanted was hope, positivity, a change of direction of travel. That of course we have massive issues to deal with, rising, poverty and rising food bank use and people out of work and so on. But we also have to have a vision for the future that is better than last year. So it is having that energy and that motivation and that aspiration for our communities to do and be the best they can be. And that I will, and the leader or the Labour activist will be saying life will be better under Labour. And for all those who just, they want a decent quality of life, they want a nice warm home, maybe a car on the drive, maybe potentially having a holiday with their family if we can ever fly again, or, a caravan holiday, something optimistic to look forward to. And we have to have that positive narrative that isn't just reflecting on the failures of the government, but is saying in your community, we will make a difference. Thanks, Clive.
Well, thank you, Tracy. If just pure energy and enthusiasm got the job done, you get it all done tomorrow, I'm sure. Thanks very much, Tracy. So, Annalise, can I come to you next?
Sure, just a couple of words after what Tracy said. I mean, it's been such a pleasure to be part of this discussion. I think it's very natural for the Labour Party to be that party of hope, because when we've seen, and I know I kind of mentioned this before, but when we've seen our country doing well during this crisis, it's been because people have acted on the basis of those values that are Labour values, and the British values, of course, as well. When we've seen, for example, as they did on the council estate that I'm speaking to you from just now, when we saw those people coming together to support, to pick up, they wanted to work together, they wanted to help each other based on that value of solidarity. They might not have called it that, but that's what it was achieved through. When we've seen the vaccine being developed as well, of course, that was because of social conscience. It was the fact that Oxford University said they were determined that the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine would be delivered just at cost price during this pandemic, and to countries that couldn't afford it otherwise at cost price in perpetuity. And they worked together, of course, with business, with the NHS, with people going above and beyond to make sure that that was delivered. I think we've shown what our country can achieve during this crisis, despite, frankly, the appalling mismanagement and behaviour of the Conservative government so often. We've shown what can be achieved. So we've got to build on those values for the future. As Tracy said, we've got to be that voice of hope and optimism. And I actually think we're well placed to deliver that message. So we've got to have confidence in it.
Thanks, Tracy. And it's a joy to see the person in charge of reviewing Labour Party policy sitting in front of a bookshelf with a book on it saying "Tax the Rich." That's the message we want to hear. So anyhow, Mark, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It really has been a pleasure and an honour to have you here, and to hear what you've had to say. So don't know if you've got anything to add about what advice you can give to those people trying to win in those seats where we're not currently in power, or those seats we don't hold. But we certainly want to hear your closing remarks. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's a very couple of last points. I think we need to show a bit more that we like one another in the Labour Party. We certainly need to show that we like the people we are seeking to represent. So as well as hope and optimism, I'll offer you the word belonging. So when we're out in those communities where we need to win them back for Labour, I think we're just going to be saying to people, you belong with the Labour Party and the Labour Party belongs to you. And then, whether it is Worthing, Wales or West Yorkshire, we really will get people wanting to vote for us, because they will say to us collectively, as they said to Tracy on the bus, we vote for you because you're one of us. And that's what we want the Labour Party to be in those communities. Once again, we want people to feel that the Labour Party and them, we belong to one another. We're one of you, you're one of us.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. What a message to finish on. It just falls to me now to conclude and say thank you to our guests. I hope all of you out there, I can't hear a round of applause. This is this strange world of the internet that we're in now. But I'm sure you're all applauding in your heads back there for three wonderful contributions, and we're very grateful for them. Sharing this evening with us when we're relaunching our website. But it is all about you people out there, you party members. I hope you found kindred spirits in the people that have spoken tonight, and we certainly have them within the Tribune group of MPs. We don't have to abandon our socialist values in order to get into government, and we want to work with you and to value your views, but also help to shape the policies of the Labour Party as we go forwards. And we hope that you'll join us in that. So thank you again to Annalise, Mark and Tracy for joining us tonight. And most of all, thank you for those of you who joined us and watched the event. Thank you very much.